Nitilapavishtam Vishnupad Rashatarashatashmad Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Srila Gurudev Ki Jai. Nitilapavishtam Vishnupad Rashatarashatashmad Srila Bhaktivedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitilapavishtam Vishnupad Rashatarashatashmad Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitilapavishtam Vishnupad Rashatarashatashmad Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Rashatarashatashmat Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosai Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Maha-Bhagavat Srila Gorkishore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Srila Satchir Aranda Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Vaishnav Sarva Bhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopal Patadasha Gunath Sharda Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda Ki Jai. Namachay Shri Hari Ras Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Kshetra Mandal Gaura Mandal Braja Mandal Mathura Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Sarva Abhishta Pradata Giriraj Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Radha Kund Shama Kund Ki Jai. Shri Mona Devi Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Purnamasi Yogamaya Ki Jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samagat Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Is today anything special? Let's see, 26th. No. Panchami means they're going to post on the Raise of the Harmonist mailing list today. And tomorrow is Srila Bhakti Srirup Siddhanti Goswami Maharaj's disappearance day. And the day after that is Srila Prabhupada's arrival in the USA in 1965. All right. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Śrīmad-Bhakti Vedanta Narayana Namine. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishe Namaha. Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaya Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadbhaktaya Namo Namaha. Yam Pravrajantam Anupetam Apeta Krityam Dvaipayano Viraha Katara Ajuhava Putreti Tanmayataya Taravo Bhinedustam Sarva Bhuta Hridaya Munimanatosmi Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Shrinvatang Swakata Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtana Vridantasto Yabhadrani Vidhunoti Suritsatam Nashta Prayeshvabhadreshu Nityang Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki tavai vasmi na jivami tvaya vina iti vigyaya radhe tvam nayamam charanantikam bhaktya vihina aparada lakshay kshiptashtakama ditaram kamadhe Kripa Maitam Sharanam Prapanna Vrinde Namaste Charanarvinda. Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Dandavat pranams Gargaraji, Ganga Didi, Raseshwari Mataji, Prajumna Prabhu and Mantra Murti Mataji. Dandavat pranams everybody. Hari Bol. Alright. So, where are we? And Indira Mataji, she'll be watching soon. Indra afflicted by sinful reaction. Okay, so Parikshit asked about Indra's unhappiness. Then previously, Indra had been afraid of killing another Brahmin and hesitated to kill Vitrasura. But the sages among the demigods encouraged him. We shall perform an Ashwamedha sacrifice, and you will be relieved from the reaction. The personified sinful reaction in the form of an old witch followed Indra wherever he went. Indra lived invisibly in Manasarovar lake for 1,000 years. Nahusha ruled the heaven during Indra's absence. Indra's sins were diminished by the influence of Rudra, the protection of Lakshmi, and meditation and worship of Vishnu. He thus regained his position after a sacrifice. And then we read the false Shruti. So that's how he ended that story of Vitrasura. Now, Parikshit inquires about Vitrasura's exaltedness. Let's just read from the book. Since Vitrasura was a demon, Parikshit wondered how he could have become such an exalted devotee, even on the battlefield. Yeah, usually on the battlefield isn't when you're in your most sattvic, devotional self. Parikshit's inquiry about Vitrasura being an exalted devotee. How could Vitrasura develop firm attachment to Lord Narayan, since the demons are generally sinful and obsessed with the modes of passion and ignorance? Pure devotional service at the lotus feet of Mukunda is rare even for the demigods situated in the mode of goodness and pure saints. Devanam Shuddha Sattvanam Rishinam Chamalatmanam Bhaktir Mukunda Charane Na Praye No Pajayate. Okay, so the unlimited living entities, they have no bhakti. Then few humans interested in following Dharma, it's more rare and more rare among those desiring liberation from the material world. Those liberated persons with no material attachments, vanaprasthas, they're even more rare. Those who understand the true meaning of liberation, sannyasis, they're even more rare. But the most rare of all are devotees of Narayan or Krishna in the various rasas. Rarity of a devotee. In this material world, there are as many living entities as atoms. Among these, a very few are humans who are interested in following Dharma. Out of many persons who follow Dharma, you can follow along in the chart. Out of many persons who follow Dharma, only a few desire liberation. Among many thousands who desire liberation, one may actually achieve liberation. It's a vanaprastha. And among many thousands of such liberated persons, one who can understand the true meaning of liberation, a sannyasi, is very rare. Among many millions who are liberated and perfected in knowledge of liberation, one may be a devotee of Lord Narayan or Krishna. Such devotees who are fully peaceful are extremely rare. And that's the famous verse, Muktanam apisidanam Narayana Parayana Sudurlabha Prashanatma Kotishvapi Mahamune. That's that little red dot there. This is my doubt. How could such an infamous sinful demon, always troubling others, become greatly Krishna conscious during the raging battle? I am curious to hear about Vitrasura, who showed prowess and satisfied Indra in the battle. After hearing Maharaj Parikshit's very intelligent question, Shukadev Goswami began answering his disciple with great affection. Please listen with attention to the history that I have heard from the mouths of Vyasadeva, Narad, and Devala. King Citraketu of the province of Shurasen ruled the entire earth. During his reign, the earth produced all the necessities for life. He had 10 million wives, but none of them produced a child. Note: King Citraketu married one wife, and when she could not beget a child, he married another. Like that, he married 10 million wives to have offspring and not for enjoyment. Wow, he had a lot of determination. 10 million's a lot. Okay. Though endowed with a beautiful form, magnanimity, youth, high birth, education, wealth, and opulence, he was full of anxiety because he did not have a son. His wealth, beautiful queens, and control of all lands were not sources of happiness for him. How do you even meet 10 million people? Okay. Manjari, she's missing class. No problem, we can catch up later. Okay, so Angira Rishi arrives and questions Citraketu. Once the powerful sage Angira, traveling all over the universe, by his sweet will, came to the palace of King Citraketu. Citraketu immediately stood up and received him with worship and offerings. When the rishi was seated comfortably, Citraketu sat down. Angira congratulated Citraketu for his humility and hospitality when the king was bowing at his lotus feet. He addressed him as follows. So Angira said, "Is everything well? Are your body, mind, associates, and paraphernalia in proper condition?" When the 7 properties of material nature, Mahatattva, Ahankar, and the 5 Tanmatras, are in proper order, the living entity within the material elements is happy. Similarly, a king is protected by the 7 elements. That is, his guru, ministers, kingdom, fort, treasury, friends, and system of law and order. When a king directly depends upon his associates and follows their instructions, he is happy. Similarly, when his associates offer their gifts and activities to the king and follow his orders, they are also happy. Are you in control of your wives, citizens, secretaries, servants, merchants, ministers, palace inhabitants, governors, landholders, sons, and other dependents? If the king's mind is fully controlled, everyone will be under his control. His provincial governors and others offer tribute to him. Your pale face reflects anxiety. I see that your mind is not pleased due to yourself or others. You seem not to have achieved your desired goal. Although the great sage Angira knew everything, he inquired in this way. Thus Citraketu, desiring a son, bent low in great humility and spoke as follows. Citraketu explains the cause of his anxiety. What is unknown to perfect yogis who have destroyed all sins by austerity, knowledge, and samadhi? They can understand everything external and internal regarding the embodied conditioned souls. Yet I will disclose the cause of my anxiety to you, by your order, though you're aware of everything. My opulences do not please me, although they are desirable even for the demigods. They do not please me even though they're desirable for even all the demigods. They do not please me because I have no son. My position is just like a hungry and thirsty man who is not pleased by garlands and sandalwood pulp. Please help me get a son, and thus save me and my forefathers, who are descending into the darkness of hell due to my not having progeny. Okay, Citraketu's joy upon receiving a son. So that's where we'll finish this chapter today. Shri Shuka Uvacha Etatita Sa Bhagavan Kripalur Brahmana Sutta Shrapayitva charum tvashtaram ayajar vibhu. In response to the request of Maharaj Citraketu, Angira Rishi, who was born of Lord Brahma's mind, was very merciful toward him. Because the sage was a greatly powerful personality, he performed a sacrifice by offering oblations of sweet rice to Twashta. Jeshta Sheshta Chayaragyo Mahishinam Chabharata Namna Kṛtadyuti Tasyai Yagyochishtam Adadvija. Interesting, he performed the sacrifice to Twashta, who ended up becoming his father, right? In his next life. O Parikshit Maharaj, best of the Bharatas, the remnants of the food offered in the yajna were given by the great sage Angira to the first and most perfect among Citraketu's millions of queens, whose name was Kṛtadyuti. What does Kṛtadyuti mean? It doesn't. Ataha nripatim rajan bhavitai kastavatmaja harsha shoka pradastubhyam iti brahma suto yayo. Thereafter the great sage told the king, O great king, now you will have a son who will be the cause of both jubilation and lamentation. The sage then left without waiting for Citraketu's response. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The word harsha means jubilation, and shoka means lamentation. The king was overwhelmed with joy when he understood that he would have a son. Because of his great jubilation, he could not actually understand the statement of sage Angira. He accepted it to mean that there would certainly be jubilation because of the birth of his future son, but that he would be the king's only son, and being very proud of his great wealth and empire, he would not be very obedient to his father. Thus the king was satisfied, thinking, "Let there be a son. It does not matter if he is not very obedient." In Bengal, there is a proverb that instead of having no maternal uncle, it is better to have a maternal uncle who is blind. Yeah, a blind uncle is better than no uncle. The king accepted this philosophy, thinking that a disobedient son would be better than no son at all. The great sage Chanakya Pandit says, Korta putrena jatena yo na vidvan na dharmika kanena chakshusha kimva chakshusha pidaiva kevalam. What is the use of a son who is neither a learned scholar nor a devotee? Such a son is like a blind, diseased eye, which always causes suffering. Nevertheless, the material world is so populated that one wants to have a son even though he is useless. This attitude is represented in the history of King Citraketu. Sapi tat prashanareva Citraketu radharayat garbham Kṛtadyutir devi kritikagner ivatmajam. As Kritika Devi, after receiving the semen of Lord Shiva from Agni, conceived a child named Skanda, Kartikeya, Kṛtadyuti, having received semen from Citraketu, became pregnant after eating remnants of food from the yajna performed by Angira. Tasya anudinam garva shukla paksha ivo tupa vavride shurase nesha tejasa shanakar nripa. After receiving semen from Maharaj Citraketu, the king of Shurasen, Queen Kṛtadyuti, gradually developed in her pregnancy, O King Parikshit, just as the moon develops during the bright fortnight. Attakala upavrite kumara samajayata janayan Shurasenanam shinvatang paramang mudam. Thereafter, in due course of time, a son was born to the king. Hearing the news of this, all the inhabitants of the state of Shurasen were extremely pleased. Hrishto Raja Kumarasya Snatur Shuchir Alankrita Vachayetva Shisho Vipra Karayam Asajatakam. King Citraketu was especially pleased. After purifying himself by bathing and by decorating himself with ornaments, he engaged learned Brahmins in offering benedictions to the child and performing the birth ceremony. Tevyo hiranyam rajatang vasangsya abharanani cha graman hayan gajan pradad dhenunam arbudani shat. Unto the Brahmins who took part in the ritualistic ceremony, the king gave charity of gold, silver, garments, ornaments, villages, horses, and elephants, as well as 60 crores of cows, 600 million cows. Vavarsha kamananyesham parjanya iva dehinam dhanyam yashasya mayushyam kumarasya mahamana. As a cloud indiscriminately pours water on the earth, beneficent King Citraketu, to increase the reputation, opulence, and longevity of his son, distributed like rainfall all desirable things to everyone. Kritra labde tarajarshes tanayenu dinam pitu yatta nisas swasya kritrapte dhane snehon vardata. When a poor man gets some money after great difficulty, his affection for the money increases daily. Similarly, when King Citraketu, after great difficulty, received a son, his affection for the son increased day after day. Matus tvati-taram putre sneho moha samurbhava Kṛtadyute sapatninam prajakama jvaro bhavat. The mother's attraction and attention to the son, like that to the child's father, excessively increased. The other wives, seeing Kṛtadyuti's son, were very much agitated, as if by high fevers, with a desire to have sons. Citraketur ati pritir yatadare prajavati natatanyeshu samjagye balam lalayaton vaham. As King Citraketu fostered his son very carefully, his affection for King Kṛtadyuti increased, but gradually he lost affection for the other wives who had no sons. Taparyaptapyan atmanam garhayantobhyasu yaya anapatena dukhena ragyaschanadarena cha. The other queens were extremely unhappy due to their being sonless. Because of the king's negligence toward them, they condemned themselves in envy and lamented. Dega prajam striyam papam patyuscha griha sammatam suprajabhi sapatnibhir dasing eva tiraskritam. A wife who has no sons is neglected at home by her husband and dishonored by her co-wives, exactly like a maidservant. Certainly, such a woman is condemned in every respect because of her sinful life. As stated by Chanakya Pandit, purport, Mata yasya grihe nasti bharya cha priyavadini aranyam tena gantavyam itaranyam tata griham. A person who has no mother at home and whose wife does not speak sweetly should go to the forest. For such a person, living at home and living in the forest are equal. Similarly, for a woman who has no son, who is not cared for by her husband, and whose co-wives neglect her, treating her like a maidservant, to go to the forest is better than to remain at home. Dasinam konu santapa swamina paricharyaya apikshnam labdamananam dasya dasi vadurbhaga. Even maidservants who are constantly engaged in rendering service to the husband are honored by the husband, and thus they have nothing for which to lament. Our position, however, is that we are maidservants of the maidservant. Therefore, we are most unfortunate. Evam sandayamananam sapatnya putra sampada ragya sammata virittinam vidvesho balavana bhut. Sri Shukadev Goswami continued, being neglected by their husband and seeing Kṛtaduti's opulence in possessing a son, Kṛtaduti's co-wives always burned in envy, which became increasingly strong. Vidvesha nashtamataya striya daruna chetasa garang dadhu kumaraya tormarsha nripatim prati. As their envy increased, they lost their intelligence. Being extremely hard-hearted and unable to tolerate the king's neglect, they finally administered poison to the son. Kṛtadyuti rajananti sapatninam aghang mahat supta eveti sanchitya nirikshya vyacharat grihe. Unaware of the poison administered by her co-wives, Queen Kṛtadyuti walked within the house, thinking that her son was sleeping deeply. She did not understand that he was dead. Shayanam shuchiram balam upadharya manishini putram anayame bhadre iti dhatrim achodayat. Thinking that her child had been sleeping for a long time, Queen Kṛtadyuti, who was certainly very intelligent, ordered the nurse, "My dear friend, please bring my son here." Sashayanam upavraja drishtva chotaralochanam pranindriyatmabhistyaktam hatasmita patar bhuvi. When the maidservant approached the child who was lying down, she saw that his eyes were turned upward. There were no signs of life, all his senses having stopped. There was no signs of life, all his senses having stopped, and she could understand that the child was dead. Seeing this, she immediately cried, "Now I am doomed," and fell to the ground. Tasyas tada karnya brishatam swaram gnantya kara bhayamura uchakar api pravishyaragi tarayatmajantikam tadarshabalam sahasamritam sutam. In great agitation, the maidservant struck her breast with both hands and cried loudly in regretful words. Hearing her loud voice, the queen immediately came, and when she approached her son, she saw that he was suddenly dead. Papata bhumau parivriddaya sucha mumoha bibhrashta shiroruhambara. In great lamentation, her hair and dress in disarray, the queen fell to the ground unconscious. Tato nripanta puravartino jana narashcha naryascha nishamya rodanam agatya tulya vyasana sudukitas tascha vyalikam rurudu kitagasa. O King Parikshit, hearing the loud crying, all the inhabitants of the palace came, both men and women. Being equally aggrieved, they also began to cry. The queens who had administered the poison also cried portentously, knowing full well their offense. God, what evil queens! Shutva mritam putram alikshantakam inashtatrishti prapatan skalanspati snehanubandhai ditaya shuchabrisham vimorchito no prakritir dvijarvrita papatabalasya sapadamule mritasya virasta shiroruhambara tirgam shvasan pashpa kalo parodato nirudakanta kanta nashashaka bhashitum. When King Citraketu heard of his son's death from unknown causes, he became almost blind. Because of his great affection for his son, his lamentation grew like a blazing fire, and as he went to see the dead child, he kept slipping and falling to the ground. Surrounded by his ministers and the other officers and the learned Brahmins present, the king approached and fell unconscious at the child's feet, his hair and dress scattered. When the king, breathing heavily, regained consciousness, his eyes were tearful, and he could not speak. Patem nirikshoro shucharpitam tada mritam chabalam sutameka santatim janasaragi prakritescharridrujam sati dadhana vilalapachitradha. When the queen saw her husband, King Citraketu, merged in great lamentation and saw the dead child, who was the only son in the family, she lamented in various ways. This increased the pain in the cores of the hearts of all the inhabitants of the palace, the ministers, and all the brahmanas. Stanadvayam kumkumapankamanditam nishinchate sanjana bhashpa binduvi vikirya keshan vigalat sajasutam shushochaschitram kurariva suswaram. The garlands of flowers decorating the queen's head fell, and her hair scattered. Falling tears melted the collyrium on her eyes and moistened her breasts, which were covered with the kumkum powder. As she lamented the loss of her son, her loud crying resembled the sweet sound of a kurari bird. Aho vidatas tvam ativa balisho yastatma shrishta pratiprupama ihase pare nirjivatya parasya mritir viparyasche tvam asi dhruva para. Alas, O Providence, O Creator, you are certainly inexperienced in creation, for during the lifetime of a father, you have caused the death of his son, thus acting in opposition to your creative laws. If you are determined to contradict these laws, you are certainly the enemy of the living entities and are never merciful. Purport. This is the way a conditioned soul condemns the Supreme Creator when he meets reverses. Sometimes he accuses the Supreme Personality of Godhead of being crooked because some people are happy and some are not. Here the queen blames the Supreme Providence for her son's death. Following the creative laws, a father should die first and then his son. If the creative laws are changed according to the whims of Providence, then Providence certainly should not be considered merciful, but must be considered inimical to the creative being. Actually, it is not the Creator, but the conditioned soul who is inexperienced. He does not know how the subtle laws of fruitive activity work, and without knowledge of these laws of nature, he ignorantly criticizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nahi kramaschar iha mritu janmano shariranam astu taratma karma bhi yasneha pasho nijasarga vrittaye swayam kritaste tam imam vidvijasi. My Lord, you may say that there is no law that a father must die in the lifetime of his son, and that a son must be born in the lifetime of his father, since everyone lives and dies according to his own fruit of activity. However, if fruit of activity is so strong that birth and death depend on it, there is no need of a controller or God. Again, If you say that a controller is needed because the material energy does not have the power to act, one may answer that if the bonds of affection you have created are distributed by fruit of action, no one will raise children with affection. Instead, everyone will cruelly neglect his children. Since you have cut everyone Since you have cut the bonds of affection that compel a parent to raise his child, you appear inexperienced and unintelligent. Purport. As stated in the Brahma Samhita, Karmani nirdahati kintu chabakti bhajam. That's verse 54. One who has taken the Krishna consciousness, devotional service, that person is not affected by the results of karma. In this verse, karma has been stressed on the basis of karma mimamsa philosophy, which says that one must act according to his karma and that a supreme controller must give the results of karma. The subtle laws of karma, which are controlled by the supreme cannot be understood by ordinary conditioned souls. Therefore, Krishna says that one who can understand him and how he is acting, controlling everything but the subtle laws, immediately becomes freed from by his glance. That is the statement of Brahma Samhita, Karmani nirdahati kintu chabakti bhajam. Verse 54, Brahma Samhita. One should take to devotional service without reservations and surrender everything to the supreme will of the Lord. That will make one happy in this life and the next. Tam tatanar hasi chamam kripanam athanam taktam vichashva pitaram tavashokataptam anjastarema pavata prajadustaram yar Tvanam naya karunena yamena dhuram. My dear son, I am helpless and very much aggrieved. You should not give up my company. Just look at your lamenting father. We are helpless because without a son, we shall have to suffer the distress of going to the darkest hellish regions. You are the only hope by which we can get out of these dark regions. Therefore, I request you not to go any further. I request you to not go any further with the merciless Yama. Purport. According to Vedic injunctions, one must accept a wife just to beget a son who can deliver one from the clutches of Yamaraj. Unless one has a son to offer oblations to the Pitas, or the forefathers, one must suffer in Yamaraj's kingdom. King Citraketu was very much aggrieved, thinking that he had become his son was going away with Yamaraj. He's very much aggrieved, thinking that because his son was going away with Yamaraj, he himself would again suffer. The subtle laws exist for the karmis. If one becomes a devotee, he has no more obligations to the laws of karma. Uttishta, kindly get up. I need to get up. Uttishta tattate ime shishashva vayasas tamavayanti nripanandana tam avayanti nripanandana samvihartum suptashchiram yashanaya cha bhavan parito bhunkshvastanam piba sucho harana svakanam. My dear son, you have slept a long time. Now please get up. Your playmates are calling for you to play. Since you must be very hungry, please get up and suck my breast and dissipate our lamentation. Naham tanu jadadvishe hatamangalate mugda smitam muda vikshanam ananabjam kim bhagatosya apunar anvayam Kim bhagatosya punar anvayam anyalokam nito grihena nashanomi kalagiraste. My dear son, I am certainly most unfortunate, for I can no longer see your mild smiling. You have closed your eyes forever. I therefore conclude that you have been taken from this planet to another, from which you will not return. My dear son, I can no longer hear your pleasing voice. Shishuka uvacha vilampyata mritam putram iti chitra vilapanai Citraketur vrisham tapto mukta kantarurodaha. Sri Shukadeva Goswami continued, accompanied by his wife, who was thus lamenting for a dead son. King Citraketu began crying loudly with an open mouth, being greatly aggrieved. Tayor vilapato sarve dampatyosh taranuvrata rurudusma nara narya sarvamasid achetanam. As the king and queen lamented, all their male and female followers joined them in crying. Because of the sudden accident, all the citizens of the kingdom were almost unconscious. Evam kashmalam apanam nashta samgyam anayakam gyatvangira namarishir arjagama sanarada. When the great sage Angira understood that the king was almost dead in an ocean of lamentation, he went there with Narad Rishi. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 6th canto, 14th chapter of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, entitled King Citraketu's Lamentation. So I'm actually going to stop early today because I have to do things today, this morning. I have a guest coming and I need to clean my room, etc. But yeah, that was intense. Let's see, what are we reading tomorrow? So Narad and Angira will instruct Citraketu. Citraketu will glorify Narad and Angira and requests knowledge. And then Narad and Angira enlighten Citraketu. So that's what we're reading tomorrow. All right. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Jai Shri Guru Gauranga Kandari Giridhari Shri Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Ju Ki Jai Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Ju Ki Jai Nitil Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtara Shatashmar Shila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Shri Gurudev Ki Jai Nitil Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtara Shatashmar Shila Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Nitil Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtara Shatashmar Shila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Shila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitil Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtara Shatashmar Shila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Nitil Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtara Shatashmar Shila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitil Vishnu Mahabhagavat Shila Gorkishoras Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Nitil Vishnu Shila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai Nitil Vishnu Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Shila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Shri Rupano Gauriya Guru Varga Ki Jai Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Bhatta Shagana Shad Gosai Prabhu Ki Jai Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda Ki Jai Namachay Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai श्री क्षेत्र मंडल गौर मंडल ब्रज मंडल मथुरा वृंदावन धाम की जय। सर्व अभिष्ट विराट गिरिराज महाराज की जय। श्री राधा कुंड श्याम कुंड की जय। श्री यमुना देवी गंगा देवी की जय। श्री तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जय। श्री भक्ति देवी की जय। श्री पूर्णमासी योगमाया की जय। श्री गोपेश्वर महादेव की जय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। समागत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवाय च कृष्ण भक्ति प्रद देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः। वंशा कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। Dandavat pranams. See you all tomorrow. Hare Krishna Shas Sharma ji. Hare Krishna. Dandavat pranams.